Picture the moment Steve Jobs realized he had already lost. It's May 1985. He's just been stripped of his management responsibilities by the board. The company he built in his parents' garage, the company he bled for, screamed for, willed into existence, is now being run by a man he hired to sell soda. He still has his title. He still has his office. But he has no power. On September 17, 1985, Steve Jobs resigns. 30 years old. Publicly humiliated. Cast out. He would later say it was the best thing that ever happened to him. But here's the question no one asks. What if he was right to say that, not as therapy, but as fact? What if losing Apple is literally what made Steve Jobs Steve Jobs? Today we're running the alternate timeline. The one where Jobs wins the power struggle in 1985 and never gets fired. And what we find might surprise you. To understand why Jobs got pushed out, you need to understand what Apple actually was in the mid-1980s. It wasn't the trillion-dollar institution we know today. It was a chaotic, scrappy, brilliant mess. It was a chaotic, scrappy, brilliant mess of a company that had just made one of the most daring bets in corporate history. The Macintosh. The 1984 Super Bowl ad is still considered the greatest commercial ever made. Jobs didn't just launch a product, he launched a cultural moment. A computer for the rest of us. Point and click instead of command lines. It was genuinely revolutionary. And it wasn't selling. The Mac was too slow. Too expensive. It couldn't run the business software corporate America ran on. IBM and its clones owned the Office. The Mac owned the art room. Revenue was falling. The board was nervous. John Sculley had been CEO of PepsiCo. He was elegant, disciplined, and exactly the kind of executive that institutional investors trusted. Jobs had recruited him personally in 1983 with a pitch so famous. Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world? Sculley said yes. He moved to Silicon Valley. He believed in the mission. For about 18 months, it worked. By 1985, the relationship had collapsed entirely. Jobs wanted to drop the Mac's price aggressively, pour money into R&D, and force the market to adopt Apple's vision. He was willing to bleed short-term for long-term dominance. Sculley wanted margin, profitability, a stock price that wouldn't embarrass him at dinner parties. These weren't just different opinions. They were different religions. Jobs made his move first. He went to the board and argued Sculley had to go. He genuinely believed he could pull it off. He couldn't. Sculley had spent 2 years quietly building relationships with every board member. Jobs had spent 2 years alienating them. The vote wasn't close. Jobs' resignation letter. September 17, 1985. Jobs wrote his resignation letter in the boardroom. He walked out with a cardboard box, the sun in his face, and nothing left to prove to anyone because he no longer had the platform. He was 30 years old. And he was done. Or so everyone thought. Now let's rewind. Different board. Different outcome. Jobs wins. Sculley clears out his office. Jobs takes full control of Apple in the spring of 1985. Here's the thing, he should be able to fix it. His Steve Jobs. He sees 10 years ahead. So what does he do? His first call is to Bill Gates. Jobs offers Microsoft an exclusive deal, bring Office to the Mac first, before Windows. Make the Macintosh the premier productivity platform. In exchange, Apple won't clone compete with DOS. Gates takes the meeting. He's pragmatic to his core, and Apple has something Microsoft desperately needs right now, a legitimate hardware ecosystem with premium users attached to it. By 1986, Microsoft Office is running on the Macintosh. Exclusively. Suddenly, the argument against the Mac evaporates. It runs the software. It's beautiful. It costs more, but it works. Corporate adoption begins. Slowly at first, then faster. By 1988, Apple's business market share has doubled. It's a legitimate business machine. Jobs uses the revenue to do what he always wanted, obsess. The PowerBook in 1991 doesn't just succeed, it dominates. Because Jobs pushed the design team past what was comfortable. Thinner. Lighter. The trackpad for years before the industry figured it out. Every premium buyer wants one. By the mid-1990s, Apple is worth $50 billion. Not because it beat Microsoft, it didn't. But Apple owns the premium layer, the way Porsche coexists with Toyota. On paper, this is a massive success. But here is where the timeline starts to go quietly, invisibly wrong. Success is a slow anesthetic. Jobs has been CEO of Apple for a decade. He's been right so many times that the people around him have stopped questioning him. His instincts are good, but they're no longer being sharpened against real resistance. Success is a slow anesthetic. When you're fighting to survive, every decision feels like life or death. Jobs in exile, starting next from nothing, watching Pixar die and then live, had that pressure every single day. Jobs who never left? He has quarterly earnings calls and a stock price to protect. The iMac launches in 1998. It's a solid product. But it doesn't shock anyone. Polished but cautious. The iMac launches in 1998. It's a solid product, colorful, approachable. It sells well. But it doesn't shock anyone. Because Jobs isn't leading it like a man who needs to prove something. He's leading like a CEO who needs to not embarrass himself. The 1,000 songs in your pocket energy is gone. Because he got comfortable. The iPod arrives in 2001, but it's more cautious than the real one. More market tested. More focus grouped. Jobs in real history was willing to burn the entire portable CD player industry because he didn't care what Sony thought. This Jobs is thinking about cannibalization risk and shareholder reaction. It's a good product. Not a revolution. The iPhone is the sharpest divergence. Real Jobs returned in 1997 as an outsider who had nothing to lose. When he decided to build a phone, he was willing to risk everything. Alternate Jobs doesn't have that recklessness. He's been inside the machine too long. He negotiates. He compromises. The iPhone launches in 2009, 2 years late. A committee decision. By 2020, alternate Apple is worth $150 billion. A great company. A respected brand. Real Apple is worth $2.5 trillion. The difference isn't talent. It's hunger. Next and Pixar provided that hunger. Here's what Jobs actually did when Apple threw him out. He started Next Computer. It failed commercially. Completely. Almost no one bought it. He started Next Computer. It failed commercially. Completely. But while building it, he worked through something. He learned that vision alone doesn't ship products. That brilliant engineers need management. Then there was Pixar. Jobs paid $10 million for it. For years, he kept it alive on sheer belief. It nearly bankrupted him. He started thinking like a storyteller. When Toy Story came out in 1995, it wasn't just an animated film. It was proof that technology and art could coexist without either one compromising. That was a lesson Jobs carried back to Apple and never forgot. When he walked back into Cupertino in 1997, he wasn't the same person who left. He was sharper, quieter, hungrier. He knew what it felt like to lose everything. And that made him fearless. The iMac, the iPod, the iPhone, each one a dent in the universe. The products he made after his return weren't just better products. They were bolder bets, bigger risks, made by a man who had already survived the worst thing that could happen to him. Adversity didn't slow Steve Jobs down. It loaded the gun. So here's the paradox we are left with. The worst day of Steve Jobs' professional life, the day he got pushed out of Apple in front of the whole world, was almost certainly the reason he became one of the most consequential people of the 20th century. Not despite the failure. Asterisk because of it. Asterisk without the exile, there's no next. Without next, there's no return. Without the return, there's no iMac, no iPod, no iPhone. The man who changed the world needed to lose the world first. History's greatest leaders are rarely defined by their victories. They're defined by what they do the morning after they lose. If you want to see another moment in tech history that changed everything, drop it in the comments. See you next time. This was the alternate history of Steve Jobs. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into tech history. We will see you in the next video as we explore another what-if scenario. Stay curious and stay hungry.